Every day, headlines that emerge on the internet cause goosebumps. The first instinct is to take everything at face value, but don't rush. Our program provides a cold shower of verified facts. Welcome to Stop Fake.
Watch this.
The French publication L'Opinion reports that European farmers are opposing Ukraine's accession to the EU due to the threat of competition in the agricultural market. The authors also note that European countries would need to restore and modernize Ukrainian agriculture, requiring significant financial investments. Ukraine won't join the EU for years, is spread by Russia. Sidel experts and government representatives claim that the EU will have to support Kyiv for years.
It is obvious that the new proud and beautiful countries, which became micro-members of the European Union, will switch to direct feeding of caring mothers from Germany, France and other European fatties for decades. And all these Bulgarians with balls and other second-rate rabble will tighten their belts.
It must be emphasized that Medvedev doesn't do most of his comments sober, but who asks the worst of Putin's doppelganger? Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Olga Stefanishyna, emphasized that while there are challenges with carriers at the Polish border, they aren't significant enough to question Ukraine's EU membership. She highlighted that this issue should not become a subject of political speculation.
If we didn't have a full-scale war, if the borders weren't restricted, and the sea wasn't blocked, then tensions between Ukraine and Poland or other neighboring countries would have been considered ordinary trade provocations, as it was in other times before the war began, from the start of the association agreement.
In response, the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, commented on this resonant issue.
Poland will steadfastly stand shoulder to shoulder with you and support you in the fight against the aggressor, because no one understands as well as the Poles the high price that must be paid for freedom and independence. We will assist you on your path towards the European Union and NATO, because we want to see you in our European family as soon as possible.
The Institute for the Study of War made its own analysis of this situation and published a thesis about which it is difficult to disagree. Experts have noted that Russian strikes on Ukrainian port and grain infrastructure are part of a campaign by Russia to damage Ukraine's relations with its Western neighbors, in particular with Poland. They also added that Moscow was clearly defeated in this.
Watch this.
The more fakes, the weaker the enemy, as they fight with only one weapon: lies. Due to the war in the Gaza Strip, the supply of shells to Ukraine decreased by 30%. ABC News report this, referring to an unnamed high-ranking Ukrainian official. The article states that some US supplies that were intended for Ukrainian forces were diverted to Israel. Such rhetoric is already a traditional propaganda technique of the Russian Federation. In particular, just 3 days after the Hamas attack on Israel, the Kremlin resource Ukraina.ru published a publication with the title "Less Attention, Money and Weapons. What is the threat to Ukraine from the Hamas attack on Israel?" Kremlin propagandist Olga Skabeyeva Telegram channel spread manipulative messages that numerous Western activists are now also rapidly switching from Ukraine to Israel, getting into fights between supporters of Israel and supporters of Palestine, temporarily forgetting about Ukraine and Russia. The Pentagon reacted promptly to the ABC News publication.
Look, I would push back on that assertion. We have been able to supply Ukraine with what it needs during its counteroffensive, and we will continue to supply Ukraine with what it needs as we head into winter. We are able to do that, and we're able to support Israel in what it needs to defend itself in its war with Hamas. We feel confident we can do both, and we're going to continue to do both. But let me just take this as a moment to reiterate that we need Congress's help.
Watch this.
from doubts about the provision of armament to doubts about display of humanity. The Polish Liga artists published information that the armed forces of Ukraine are leaving wounded soldiers to die on the battlefield. The article also states that the Ukrainian army allegedly has unprecedented losses, and the bodies of the wounded dead are simply rotting in the trenches. All this material is based on the words of former U.S. intelligence officer Scott Ritter.
Ukrainians just abandoned the dead. They're literally coming into an area and they're looking down and there's decomposed bodies all over the place. I mean, literally blanketing the ground. And these are bodies that haven't been buried. They're not counted. They're just there. There's 60 to 80,000 missing Ukrainians. Missing.
Scott Ritter convinced of pedophilia in the past and is now making his living by spreading the Kremlin's fake. That's obvious. Narratives that Ukrainians leave their fellow citizens to die are promoted by Russian propaganda with the aim of discrediting the armed forces of Ukraine and demoralizing society. It often reaches the point of absurdity.
Politico writes that right now, at a secret training ground, French officers are teaching Ukrainians the skills of storming trenches. Classes take place 14.5 hours a day. The situation is as realistic as possible, so to speak. To get Ukrainians used to the smell of death, the French scattered animal corpses in the trenches.
In a few months of participation in a full-scale war against Ukraine, 20,000 Russians died. Former prisoners who joined the ranks of the private military company Wagner, and these are only Wagnerians. According to the latest data, Russian losses amount to almost 1,000 soldiers per day. This was reported in the Ministry of Defense of Britain. The former special representative of the US State Department, Kurt Walker, in turn stated that the armed forces of Ukraine maintain their personnel, implementing complex operations on the front line. He is convinced Ukraine is capable of winning.
Ukraine is very careful about protecting its soldiers, so it very methodically and slowly passes through minefields so as not to lose soldiers. Even under these circumstances, they advanced. Ukraine is succeeding under very difficult circumstances, without air cover, without the longest-range artillery systems we could provide, and doing so cautiously to save lives. It is impressive.
Watch this.
The blooming spring of 2024 is a delightful topic to discuss. It became known that some Republican congressmen close to ex-President Donald Trump demand holding election in Ukraine during martial law. Among these right-wing politicians, anti-Ukrainian rhetoric is popular. Vivek Ramaswamy, who claimed to be nominated by Republican Party for the post of President of the United States in 2024, is particularly prominent in this.
Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic.
Of course, there is no confirmation that Ukraine blackmailed the USA with elections. In addition to all other reasons for the impossibility of free and full expression of will in the entire territory, elections during martial law in Ukraine are prohibited by law. But who cares about laws when this topic can be fully used for propaganda?
Zelensky has very low ratings, and if elections are held, he can easily lose them miserably. This is most likely how it will be. Therefore, he is trying to use administrative levers, and simply using his capabilities and the support that he partially preserved, not to hold these elections, referring to the fact that there is a war going on. And in general, how can you think about elections?
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, reminded that the elections are a waste of significant resources. At the same time, a large part of Ukrainians who serve or who are refugees will not have the opportunity to cast their vote. The state must spend all its efforts on defending the state against the aggressor.
Now in the time of war when there are many challenges, it is completely irresponsible to throw the issue of elections into the society so lightly and playfully. The state needs much more focus on defense, especially in the regions and the rear cities, which have the appropriate resources. They need our help and support.
Everyone heard, everyone understood, all except Russians.
Watch this.
We're already sweeping away the dust of falsehood from the next news that are widely discussed around the world. So see you in the upcoming episodes. This was Stop Fake. Take care.